together, so it was a nice reading for the two of them, but it was like a compliment off between the two of them any given day.
Welcome in to the Husker Afterparty Postgame Show on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. The Husker Afterparty Postgame Show is brought to you by Action Plumbing, AC and Electrical, Gary Michaels Clothiers, and Brandt Excavating. Now, here are your hosts, Jake Bockelman and Nick Sainert.
Welcome in. It's the Husker Afterparty Postgame Show, 93.7 The Ticket, theticketfm.com. Nick Sainert and Jake Bockelman hanging out with you guys. Huskers fall to the Michigan Wolverines 34-3 in the Big House in a game where it kind of felt like everything that could go against Nebraska just happened. I'll just start to rattle all these off here. You go into the Big House as a 31-point underdog. Michigan ends up covering it on a nice little front door cover if you're into that. That field goal was significant for some. But you start the number 6 Chubba Purdy to start the game. You send out Chubba Purdy to begin the game. And you can't get really anything going on the ground. Chubba Purdy looked fine. You're in the red zone, finally making some headway, down 14-0 in I believe the second quarter, and Chubba Purdy rolls over his right leg or it snaps, whatever happened there.
Awkward slide.
Yeah, very awkward slide. It might have been even a late hit, but like it was one of those things where you're like, all right, it is what it is. Here we are. So Chubba Purdy goes down and you bring in Logan Smothers, and instantly it did not look good. The snapping was bad today, and that's something that we have not had to talk about for a couple years, ever since Cam Jurgens' first year moving to center, that we had to really talk about snapping, or that in one game it was evident over and over. And I understand that the playing conditions were not favorable, but here we are. So Nebraska loses 34-3. We want to hear from you guys, 402-464-5685, the Honda of Lincoln hotline, the Starter Heyman text line, both those open for you guys the entire show today. We'll be here until about 7:25 or so, a full hour and a half to get your guys' thoughts to how we're feeling about this one. We'll hear from Mickey Joseph, some of the players possibly in the next segment. But now let's bring in Jake Bockelman. Bach, how are we feeling, man?
Not too great. I mean, this is not a good look for Nebraska. It's kind of sad because we've been talking about this over the last several weeks. I don't think this is a national embarrassment. And at one time, it would be. It would be kind of the talk of college football that Nebraska got shellacked, got held to 3 points.
Yeah.
Fortunately for this team, I mean, it's not to the point. Last time Nebraska scored 3 points, by the way, was 2016 when they lost 62-3. It wasn't that bad. I don't think this is one we're just gonna always remember. But at the same time, 147 total yards. I mean, everything's already kind of gone against this team. It's been a difficult situation. You add more to that with your second string quarterback going down, with your offensive coordinator going down before halftime against a top 4 team. Just seems like things couldn't get much worse, but it seems like we've said that before. Hopefully we're close to the bottom. If there's bottoming out, it's got to feel like this. I mean, it can't get much worse than this. Nebraska now again, this pretty much solidifies not going to a bowl game. They're not going to have a 500 season once again. So it's a tough pill to swallow. And unfortunately, because of the lead up to the game, because of the point spread, because of the way that it played out exactly like everybody predicted, I just feel like, perhaps without that coaching search in the background, as far as this game day, this felt like apathy as much as I've ever seen it for Nebraska football.
Well, I was going to say, I'm genuinely curious. I mean, 402-464-5685, and I'm kind of afraid to know the answer because I can predict the answer. But I mean, how interested were you guys in that game? Like, seriously, sitting here, once Nebraska got into the third quarter and it was 24-3. I mean, how close, if you guys were watching the game and if you were in a group of people, I mean, how close are you really watching that game? If you're at a sport, like, here's the thing, Bach. I went to a sports bar to start with the game. Like, you know what? There's going to be some good amount of energy here. And if I needed another reminder, like that's when it hit me just how bad of a situation it is right now. Because the sports bars have zero energy. And that's not even on the fans' fault. Like I'm not saying that to blame the fans of like, you guys need to get out there and cheer on the Huskers publicly. Like I'm not saying that. But there was just nothing. The group in the sports bar, and I kid you not, the group in the sports bar that was, and bless their soul, that was the loudest, were a group of 6 old ladies yelling, "Get him, get him, get him," every time Blake Corum touched the ball. That was the loudest. And I understand you're playing Michigan. I understand there was little to no shot to even compete in this game. I get that. But that just shows where Nebraska's at as a program and what these fans, ourselves included, Bach, because we both can agree and can publicly say our job is a heck of a lot more enjoyable when Nebraska wins games. Oh, yeah. That just shows how much we all have had to endure and go through in the last however many years. And now you're sitting here, and Nebraska's best possible record is 5-7.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult. It really is. It's like closing in on the idea. And I know Wisconsin and Iowa were playing. I think Iowa was up in that one, but it's closing in the idea of back-to-back 3-9 seasons. And I've never thought in my life I'd see a 3-9 season at Nebraska. I'm not counting them as losses already.
Yeah.
Obviously getting Wisconsin at home, but if you're being honest, I mean, we know what the Vegas line's going to be on those games. They're not going to be favoring the Huskers. So, we'll see. I mean, I think part of it, if we're honest, is Casey Thompson being out. If Casey Thompson's in this ball game, there's a whole different level of energy this week. There's a whole different, you're probably a double-digit underdog. Right, yeah. But you still at least feel like you feel like you have a puncher's chance, and you're right. I mean, maybe they would have been able to upend Minnesota last week. But so that's what this thing is. I mean, when Nebraska decided to go this route, the route that they went with this year, this was a strong possibility of it playing out like this, because that's what Scott Frost's resume or history told you he was going to do. Like, he averaged going 1-2, then he goes 1-2, and you fire him. Well, that's exactly what happened. And then you kind of have a team in disarray. Maybe it's worth it to give Mickey Joseph an opportunity, but this is when I said in the offseason they were just throwing a bunch of things at the wall and seeing if any of it sticks. A lot of it's not sticking, and when you're throwing stuff at the wall, you're gonna, very thin depth in areas, and clearly the quarterback depth is a problem. Absolutely no chance really to do much. I mean, Logan Smothers, we did see him after Purdy went down. I didn't do any better. So it's a long way to go in a lot of areas. Keep penalties whenever they had any little bit of momentum. A penalty would stall the drive. A drop pass would do it. There's not much to like about this game. You can point out, Ernest Hausman looked good here and there. I mean, but there's just not much to like about this game. Michigan controlled the tempo, controlled the pace, controlled the ball game, and Nebraska felt out of it. As it was close there. And I would have liked to see Nebraska be a little more aggressive. The field goal, I understand, and it prevents them from being, because he took the sack. But, I thought early in the game, they're at their own 32. So this is just a wild thought to begin with, but they're down. I felt like this is kind of the Scott Frost game against Ohio State, his first year, where it's like, nobody believes in you. It's 4th and 1. If you can't get it here, I mean, you got to kind of play like you're going to have to steal some moments there. And I don't know if they did that. I mean, but there's not like a single play or a single thing here. Nebraska got dominated by one of the best offensive lines. Anytime they did hit Blake Corum, he dragged him for another 3 or 4 yards. It just, there's not a lot of positives.
I want to talk about that a little bit deeper, but first let's pause 10 seconds for station ID.
This is Lincoln's home for sports talk on the FM dial. Also online at theticketfm.com. On the internet. KNTK FM Firth, 93.7 The Ticket.
Okay, so you mentioned that the offensive line. And now here we are after 3 straight losses against Illinois, Minnesota, and now Michigan. That whoever the next head coach is, whoever is tasked with leading this team, if you need a blueprint on how to be successful, it's going to be the same conversation we had the last 2 weeks, Bach. If you need a blueprint, it starts in the trenches. You saw it right from the get-go. The first play of the game, or first play from scrimmage for Michigan's offense, it was a Blake Corum run that he got knocked down at 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, but then he got pushed forward by his offensive line for another 6 yards. And at that moment, I looked and I was like, oh boy, like this is going to be a heck of a task. And looking back, can you put this one fully on the defense? Probably not. You probably can't, because the offense is just abysmal.
Right.
It just can't get anything going. And also there was a moment in the first half there where I don't know if this was at halftime, where Nebraska and Michigan were even on time of possession. It was like 12 minutes and change apiece. And so I thought to myself, okay, for the first half, Nebraska's down 14 at the break. Listen, this is kind of where we thought we were. But even at that moment, you just did not feel like you had much of a fighting chance because of what the Michigan offense had done and what their play calling was and what their play style is. And basically that's all: run the football, pound the rock down to where it continues to wear down the defense. And yes, there were some bright spots. Ernest Hausman had a great sack. Luke Reimer wrapped up a couple times. Gifford was filling in at safety for Miles Farmer. Like it was fine. Nebraska escaped without giving a ton of deep balls up, and you had questionable calls on the fumble through the end zone. Like you had all that stuff. But see, here's the thing: when you get whoever is the next leader, whether it's Mickey, whether it's Matt Rule, whether it's frickin' Deion Sanders, there is a blueprint. And you only need to see these last 3 games to see it and to recognize it and to understand that you have to be able to get some sort of push. I mean, for goodness sakes, you were 3rd and 1, and you gave the ball to 3rd and 2. You gave the ball to Anthony Grant in the final couple minutes of the game, and he's only able to get 1 yard. And then you go and give a quarterback sneak on 4th and 1. On your own 30-yard line, and Logan Smothers is only able to get half a yard and barely get the first down. But then on the other side, you're seeing Blake Corum continually get 6, 7, 9, and not necessarily just because of how good he is, but because of the push of the offensive line, both in the front, getting their initial blockers, and pushing him from behind forward, playing through the echo of the whistle. Like that is what Nebraska is missing over and over and over again, especially as we get from Jim on the Starter Heyman Jewelers video stream, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, especially in bad weather.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
which is
in bad
everywhere
weather.
In the Big Ten,
which
today.
is the Big Ten to a T.
Yeah.
In November, when the games matter most, in the month of November, that's when you decide if you're playing for a divisional title or not, if Nebraska ever gets to that point, which I think they will, when Nebraska gets to that point again, you got to figure out a way to win games in November when it's snowy. And now this is time and time again, going all the way back to the Melvin Gordon game, when it was crappy and it was snowy and you couldn't run the ball. I mean, this is a problem that transcends Mickey Joseph, Scott Frost, Mike Riley. It goes through all back of them. And all 3 of those guys, Mickey Joseph kind of doesn't necessarily get a pass here, but he kind of is on a different conversation part when you say those guys couldn't fix it.
Yeah.
They haven't been able to fix it when the blueprint's been laid out for them, basically.
Well, and I've said it for a long time. The blueprint is somewhat of what Nebraska created and showed the nation to play Midwestern football to begin with, which got them their titles, which got them their success. And I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, and hopefully it turns around. These last 20 years, it's like they've been trying to find, outside some of the Bose years, they had they had success running the ball too. Yeah. But when they've kind of gone to this idea that, that's an old school way and there's a ceiling to that, and we can recruit better than our opponents, and so we're going to do these flashy offenses. Well, it hasn't worked. I mean, this Big Ten West, and it's ugly, and Nebraska should be right in the thick of this ugly argument, but they're not here once again because they've been trying different flashy offenses to try to, be mini versions of USC or Ohio State, and getting destroyed on the front lines by teams in the Big Ten West, in the Midwest, that prioritize having those front lines because they're used to it. That's how the Big Ten's always been. That's how they've played. And so, I mean, the Big Ten West is probably going to come to a close next month, or excuse me, next year. And it's just sad the record that it's going to be laying for Nebraska while they've been there. Hopefully they beat Wisconsin or Iowa by then, at least one of them. But, when you talk about kind of the lows of lows, it's like this division was created for Nebraska historically.
Big time.
This division is exactly what Nebraska should have asked for a long time ago, but they've strayed away from who they are. They strayed away from successful football in the Midwest. And, and this is where they are. And so it's going to be difficult to kind of put that back together. And I think that the whole idea that I'm not saying you just have to run, Wisconsin's offense with a pro style heavy set every other play. Yeah. You can adjust to it, and you can add to it as you go on. But if I'm the next head coach here, that's my first thing, is install that. And it might be a couple years until you can really get a little bit more flashy with it. Or maybe you can get the Trey Palmer to stick around. Maybe you can get some other guys, and his stock's fallen for what it's worth, probably NFL wise. But it's
yikes.
Yeah,
that was a bad drop. Like there was one that, I mean, the guy was, the defender was 3 yards away from him, and it was not an inaccurate throw. Palmer was squared up with it and just dropped it. And when you have a backup quarterback, you're talking about that. Like when you have a backup quarterback, you have Mark Whipple was still calling plays. He was still fine at that point. Like you need every little thing to go your way. And so it's just frustrating here. So David on this video stream says, I think the new coach, whoever it is, needs to have an identity before the season starts. That's the root of all the problems. I agree with you, David. I would also add that Scott Frost thought that his identity would work. Recruit speed. Like, to be fair, like Scott Frost had the identity that he wanted, or said his identity going into his time here in Nebraska. But I think there's a point here where now years and years and years of losing and playing horrible football, undisciplined, and just not being able to gain, like when we talk about over the course of time and gaining on the gap between Nebraska and Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio State, like this year, I would not say Nebraska has even gained on Wisconsin and Iowa. I think Wisconsin and Iowa have just regressed. Mm-hmm. Like it has not been a thing that Nebraska's gotten better to where, oh, you look up at the standings and Wisconsin's a 500 team, Iowa's a 500 team, and things like that. It's the Wisconsin, Iowa have regressed, and Nebraska feels farther away from Michigan and Ohio State than they have in a long time. And so with that in mind, part of it would also be to just realize that Nebraska might need to, I don't want to say stop thinking Nebraska is bigger than the Big Ten. And that might be, that might be brutal, and that might be too tough to hear. Like maybe that's too hard to hear, but from right now, at this point, you need something foundational. You need, this is where, once again, you might need, as Bach said, you might need to be boring and just cutthroat right at the start with this new, whoever the new guy is in charge. And then once you have that foundation and you have some sense of stability, which this program has been lacking in the last 7-8 years, once you have some stability throughout the entire staff, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, offensive line coach, running back coach, head coach, athletic director, for God's sakes. Once you have some stability, then you can start to branch. But from looking in the next 2-3 years, as tough it is to say as a Husker fan myself, this is something that needs to be foundationally built.
Yeah.
And that starts recruiting, that starts being boring, and that starts, if you're going to be in the Big Ten, especially as they start to transition, because the Big Ten is not going to wait for Nebraska to get good. They do not care. If anything has shown from what the conference has done in the last 10 years since Nebraska's been in it, is that they do not give a damn about Nebraska. So the Big Ten Conference and all the other teams in it are not waiting for Nebraska to be good, to say, oh, we got to wait for Nebraska to start competing so that way we can add these teams. They're not going to do that. They're totally fine with you racking up all this money because Husker fans are just that great and that loyal that if you turn into a Nebraska, or excuse me, turn into a Northwestern, so be it. So be it. You're still valuable in terms of financials to the conference.
Well,
And
yeah,
so
and there's not really an option to
and there's
slow
not there's
down.
not really an option.
Everybody's trying to make their own money.
So as a program, you got to figure something out fast. You have to get something figured out fast. And the quicker that whoever is in charge, if it's Mickey Joseph, and I think Mickey has realized this, I just don't know if he's going to be the guy in charge. Whoever's in charge needs to kind of swallow the pride and say, listen, we need to do this foundationally, get some stability, find the right guys, maybe not the sexy guys, but the right guys, both in athletes and in a coaching staff, and slowly build this thing up the right way. And it's not going to be great to watch maybe next year even, but maybe we see the fruits of the labor pay off 3-4 years down the road.
Well, and a reminder too. I mean, that's the ugly part of it too. Is I mean, there's different ways to look at this, but one of them is if you're going to start playing Big Ten West Bully Bowl or Big Ten Bully Bowl, you're doing so at a disadvantage where all these other teams have been working. Like they know the plan. They know what's going to win around here. So they've been working on that for years and years and years. So you're starting at a place trying to do the same thing they are. You're starting behind them. So it might take a couple years, but I mean, at this point, the other thing, but another thing to remind yourself about that is this style, like Michigan played out. I mean, Michigan dominated this game a lot more than winning with 34 points. And that's part of the style, though. Part of the style is not necessarily being too impressive. Or just going to break records for scoring points. And sometimes it's going to keep Nebraska or a lower rung team in the game. I mean, the Big Ten West is a mess with upsets from week to week. So I don't want to get into this doom and gloom scenario, but I do think it is getting closer. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you can say what you want about overall program identity or this or that. When you just talk about the lines, the line play is not up to Big Ten par, and it's going to and on both sides. Now, the defensive line has done a lot better and better than what you would think this offseason when they just had to kind of throw a bunch of guys together as well for a few weeks. Or if you remember the offseason, it looked really scary. And so, but at the same time, you're behind on these offensive lines, and they went out there and they got a pass rushing offensive line.
Yeah.
Well, how many passers are they beating? How many sacks are they? The pass rushing offensive or defensive line, hasn't turned out to been as stellar as you wanted it to be to begin with. And just what is? I want a pass rusher too, but you got to stop the run in this league.
So we get this off the Starter Heyman text line 402-464-5685, and I always like to point these out. Stop talking. You are sounding stupid. Everyone knows this. Mickey understands it's about recruiting, period. Jimmy's and Joe's, not X's and O's. Recruiting's great. Recruiting's been just fine at Nebraska. But what happens when they get here? Why do you need a transfer portal? Nebraska needed a transfer portal quarterback after Adrian Martinez left. But why? Because Logan Smothers isn't ready. Chubba Purdy is still not ready. Heinrich Harburg is not ready. You don't have a guy if you look now, obviously on the grand scale, okay, and far away from Nebraska is Alabama. But if you look at the Alabama quarterbacks over the last 20 or 10, 15 years, it's not just A.J. McCarron. They always have a filler guy that's ready to step in while one guy that is behind him is waiting to go, is still developing and still figuring out the lay of the land. That's the guys like Blake Sims that nobody talks about. It's the guys like Greg McElroy that was not sexy at all, but just got the job done. Now, I understand that's Alabama and this is Nebraska, but Nebraska doesn't have that. You throw out Logan Smothers or Chubba Purdy, and that's not even on them. Part of it is because at some point players have to play, but the development across 85% of the positions has just been non-existent. So you have to go to the transfer portal and get a Samari Toure and lean heavily on him the entire season. You have to go into the transfer portal and get Trey Palmer and Marcus Washington and Casey Thompson and Anthony Grant. You have to get all these guys and make them immediately impact the game. When the transfer portal is great when you can just use them as kind of not even a filler, but as the one piece that you're missing. The one piece that you're missing. But Nebraska can't do that. They haven't been able to do that. They don't have the luxury of just going out and only getting Trey Palmer or being one piece away to where they only need to go get an O'Shawn Mathis. They're not at that point, and they haven't been. And so, yes, recruiting's great. But if you also look at the recruiting classes over the last couple years, the transfer portal recruiting statistically is great, and the high school recruiting is just fine.
Yeah,
Scott Frost recruited top 25 classes almost pretty much every year he was here, except the one year that they had one of the best transfer portal recruiting classes.
And Nebraska will do that. I've said this over time, just studying the recruiting rankings. And maybe, rankings can mislead you clearly. But the other thing, that's why a lot of people think that it's more development than recruiting, because Nebraska for years, whether it's Scott Frost, Mike Riley, Bo Pelini, once in a while they'd fall to 28th or 32nd, but Nebraska pretty much recruits top 25 classes in and of itself. You don't need a special coach to do that. Now, some of the coaches can move you up in the rankings. We saw Bill Callahan get you pretty high, but it's not like Nebraska. Sometimes I think, and this roster might not be the best example, but over the last several years, I think of what other coaches around the nation or around the Big Ten look at Nebraska's roster talent and think, man, what could I do with that?
Yeah.
And, you can say, maybe think I'm joking, but look what K-State's doing with Adrian. Look what Kentucky did with Wandale. I mean, these guys, they've had some talent here and there, but you're not getting a whole lot out of it in games. And again, this was a game we all said coming in, okay, you're going to need a huge game from Trey Palmer. And they targeted him, but he didn't get it done. Anthony Grant, we all said, okay, he needs like 31 carries. Well, he's averaging like 2 yards a carry. So they just didn't have the playmakers to keep up with this game. And this game, quite frankly, is somewhat even unfair to talk about because Michigan's at just such a higher level than Nebraska. And again, I give the defense a little bit of credit for keeping this game where it was. Give the offense a little credit for not turning the ball over. There's certain things that you can point out. Purdy got, they kind of recognized that Michigan was dropping back or in man-to-man or whatever, and Purdy could run up the middle and use that in the passing game. So there were a few bright spots, but it's one of those games that you don't necessarily talk about the game. You talk about the program because the program looks so far back.
That's exactly where I'm at. And I talked about this quite a bit in the preseason prior to the season beginning. And there's this a program that it comes out every single football season, and it's by Brett Ciancia, Pick Six Previews. All right. And in this book, he looks at every single team in the Power Five. All right. So Nebraska, the entire Big Ten West, that's what I want to focus on here before we get to our first break. And recruiting is great, but what do you do with the guys once they get here? All right. I just want to go through a couple of these teams. So they have a statistic in this book that correlates player development and it takes the recruit rank from the recruiting classes of the last 4 years and talks about draft in the last 3 years, basically, right? And it also talks about win conversion and bringing up recruiting rank to how many wins you get with that recruiting class, all right? Mm-hmm. So those four. Nebraska, out of 66 Power 5 teams, in player development, ranks 62nd out of 66 Power 5 teams. In win conversion, Nebraska ranks out of 66 teams 65th. Now you look at the rest of the Big Ten West. Now I understand Iowa's having a down year, but we're talking about a program standpoint.
They might win the Big Ten West.
Which is unbelievable right now. Player development, recruit rank in versus draft picks. Iowa, out of 66 Power 5 teams, ranks first. In win conversion, ranks third. Let's keep going. Minnesota, in player development, ranks fourth. Win conversion, ranks 12th. Minnesota's best recruiting class in the last, 10 years, and I understand that predates PJ Fleck, has been 37th. 37th. Purdue, 9th best in player development. 15th best in win conversion. Illinois, 22nd in player development. They're Northwestern in win conversion, from recruit rank to translating that to wins on the football field, which is what determines whether or not you keep your job. Northwestern is 17th in the country. I understand a lot of those teams in the Big Ten West are having down years. I get that. But there is a key to success. And yes, recruiting rankings are great. Recruiting rankings are fun to get excited about in the offseason. And I'm not saying to not get excited about Nebraska's recruiting class and signing 4-star talent and signing big bodies out of the transfer portal and whatever you want to talk about. But at some point, once again, it's got to be a thorough process. Recruit, develop, win. Recruit, develop, win. And it's a regurgitating process. Keep on going. Because there's no way that Illinois' best recruiting class was last year in the last 10 years under Brett Bielema, and it was 46th in the country. Purdue's best recruiting class, 33rd. Minnesota's 37th. Iowa's 30th. Nebraska's best recruiting class, Nebraska's worst recruiting class in the last 10 years was in 2014 with Bo Pelini, 35th. It is laid out on paper that recruiting rankings are awesome. But if you can't do anything with the talent when it gets here, if you're going to have an offensive lineman be here for 6 years and play one half of a season, that does nothing for you. Does nothing for your program. Because then once that guy leaves, you need a true freshman to come in and be ready to play as an 18-year-old in one of the most physical conferences in the country because you didn't do your job. And that the 4 guys that you built depth with, not one of them is ready to play on Saturdays.
Yeah.
It's extremely frustrating. And when I see this, once again, 62nd in player development and 65th in win conversion, from recruiting rankings to wins and to draft picks.
Yeah, and as we saw, last week with Kansas getting to bowl eligibility, Nebraska, the only team in the Power 5 not to have gone there since 2017. That will continue here. So when you say it, it's inarguable. It's all kind of there on paper. It's all there in the facts that Nebraska's program is in a really rough place. And I don't want to get too down on it because I don't think that it necessarily, even again with the whole idea that you kind of need to build the foundation. I don't know if that means that you're back into this 5-8 year run, or people that wanted to give Scott Frost 8 years, regardless what it looked like. Still pay attention to how it's being built. But, teams do struggle a lot of the times in coaches' first years and then kind of turn it around from there. That's kind of the Matt Rule recipe, by the way, if they do go the Matt Rule route. So it's going to take patience. But I think Nebraska fans are in a spot where, there's not really too much of another option. I mean, if I wanted Urban Meyer from the get-go, but who doesn't, right? Other than his other stuff. I know there are people that don't like his off-the-field stuff, but but there are limited guys out there in the pool that I think, all right, by year 2 or 3, they're going to be competing with the Michigan types.
Yeah. Once again, 402-464-5685, the Honda of Lincoln hotline, the Starter Heyman text line, both those open for you guys the entire show today. We'll be here for another hour. Then there's going to be a Tanner's post-game show coming your way from Tanner's Bar and Grill, 30th and Yankee Hill. Make sure you head out there. Luffy says this: it's a 4-way tie for first place in the West at 4-3, which is the record of 4-3, and we aren't even good enough to be in the mix. It's pathetic, really, and that kind of tells you. That just kind of tells you where we're at, I suppose. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll hear from Mickey Joseph. Injury update on Chuba Purdy. We'll let you guys know coming up after the break. It's Husker Afterparty Postgame Show, sponsored by Action Plumbing, Heating, AC, and Electrical, Gary Michaels Clothiers, and Brandt Excavating, Nick Sainer, Jake Bachhoven. We will be back in a couple minutes as we continue to break down Nebraska's 34-3 loss at the hands of the Michigan Wolverines in the Big House. We'll be right back on 93.7 The Ticket.
Lincoln's best place to meet, eat, and compete.
Bowling, check. Arcade, check. Laser tag, check. Volleyball, cornhole, bocce, food, drinks, check, 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 check. The newly renovated Sun Valley Lanes and Games has something fun to offer for guests of all ages. Win prizes in the arcade or challenge your friends in one of the many attractions. Plan a night of fun by reserving your spot online at sunvalleylanes.com.
Sun Valley.
Bauer Underground has been serving local content since 1997. When you see the black and white trucks, you know that the best workers in the business have arrived. Bauer is currently looking for equipment operators, laborers, diesel mechanics, and aerial linemen. Join the brotherhood built upon hard work, authentic people, and a pedigree of success. They're offering top-notch benefits, a matching 401k, and a $600 per year clothing allowance. Bauer Underground, a family-friendly company with room for advancement.
Action Plumbing, Heating, Air, and Electric brings exciting career opportunities for you or someone you know. They are now hiring plumbers, electricians, and HVAC techs and installers to continually build their professional team. They offer competitive pay and full benefits packages that include health, dental, vision, PTO, and 401k options. Action has created a positive team environment for over 50 years. Apply online at actionlincoln.com.
You had to know that when Wingstop set out to make a crispy, juicy chicken sandwich, they wouldn't make it in just one flavor. They'd make it in all 12, like lemon pepper, mango habanero, hickory smoked barbecue, and OG hot. So why have one new favorite chicken sandwich when you can have 12? Try the new sauced and tossed Wingstop chicken sandwich today for only $5.49 at Wingstop, where flavor gets its wings. Valid for a limited time and available at participating Wingstop locations only while supplies last. Price subject to applicable taxes and fees.
Look at your car. It's filthy and probably has a few dings and nicks all over it. Don't be that guy. Get it upgraded and repaired at Renew Your Auto. At Renew Your Auto, tons of services: ceramic coating, window tinting, paintless dent repair, washes and details, bed liners, body shop, and more. Where to go to get services like that all in one place? Schedule your appointment today at renewyourauto.com. See what Renew can do for you.
Action Plumbing, Heating, Air, and Electric is the call I make when I have a need for plumbing services. Whether it's for my home or office, if I need a repair to a water heater, softener, or even my garbage disposal, I know I can count on Action to help. In one simple call, their amazing customer service team promptly schedules a service call, often getting to my needs within a day. Action delivers honest, quality services we can count on. To learn more, visit actionlincoln.com.
A smoke-free environment is the only way to fully protect from the dangers of secondhand smoke. That's why smoke-free policies are so important to me. Whether it's in my car, apartment building, or when I'm dining outdoors, there's no place for secondhand smoke or e-cigarette aerosol. Breathe easier knowing the facts. Visit smokefree.ne.gov. Paid for by Tobacco Free Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Tractor Supply Distribution Center in Waverly is holding a hiring event this Friday and Saturday. Stop by between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. on either day to learn more about their opportunities for your next career. Tours and interviews will be conducted both days. Wages grow up to $20 per hour. Make plans to attend Friday or Saturday at 12851 Dover Street in Waverly. And if you can't make it, you can always apply online at tractorsupply.jobs. Tractor Supply, for life out here.
Hey, who caught that ball? That field goal was good, right? Is the scoreboard fuzzy to anyone else?
Dude, you have got to get your eyes checked, man.
If you're noticing that the game is getting a little tougher to follow, it might be time for a checkup at Premier Vision. They have state-of-the-art equipment, a variety of frames, and great lens options. Visit Premier Vision today, just south of Van Dorn at 84th and Firethorn.
If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide or experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis, call 988 for free, confidential, and compassionate support. On July 16th, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is transitioning to 988. There is hope. For 24/7 support, call, text, or chat 988.
Sponsored by Nebraska DHHS, aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
I think it's just vapor. Vaping is safer than smoking, isn't it?
There's really not even that much nicotine in them, right?
One vape pod has as much nicotine as one pack of cigarettes.
My kid
knows it's dangerous. 5.4 million American kids vape, and most think it's harmless. Get your head out of the cloud. Talk to your kid about vaping. Visit talkaboutvaping.org. That's talkaboutvaping.org. Brought to you by the American Lung Association and the Ad Council.
Finally, a good reason to have a smart house. Just say, Alexa, play 93.7 The Ticket, and we'll magically start playing. How's it work? Nobody knows. Don't ask questions.
Trendy or traditional, Gary Michaels Clothiers specializes in men's tailored clothing. Off the rack or custom made to measure, there is simply no better shopping experience. Offering designer furnishings, sportswear, shoes, outerwear, and accessories for a man always concerned at looking his best. With world-class tailoring and personal service, all makes Gary Michaels Clothiers Nebraska's premier store for men. Come visit us now at Village Gardens, south of 56th and Pine Lake Road in Lincoln.
Action Plumbing, Heating, Air, and Electric is the call I make when I have a need for plumbing services. Whether it's for my home or office, if I need a repair, heat softener, or even my garbage disposal, I know I can count on Action to help. In one simple call, their amazing customer service team promptly schedules a service call, often getting to my needs within a day. Action delivers honest, quality services we can count on. To learn more, visit actionlincoln.com.
Get an immediate look back at the game from the people who know it. It's the Tanner's Show, the final word, live from Tanner's Bar and Grill at 30th and Yankee Hill. Hear from former players and national champions like Jim Foreman, Rashawn Jackson, and Aaron Davis, and see what they saw at the game. It's the Tanner's Postgame Show and the final word, live and in person, home or away at Tanner's Bar and Grill, brought to you by Bauer Infrastructure. Only here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Back to the Husker Afterparty Postgame Show on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Yes, and it's, like you said, it's up to Casey. Still have some nerve damage in his pinky, so we'll see how Casey feels tomorrow. I'm sure if I look at my phone, he's probably already texted me and called me that he's ready to play next week. So we'll take it day by day with Casey. We won't put Casey out there unless he can play at a high level.
So there's Mickey Joseph on an update to Casey Thompson's injury. Still a little nerve damage in that pinky. We'll find out if he's ready to go next Saturday at home against Wisconsin. Still waiting to hear on what time that game is. We'll probably hear tonight, maybe Monday. It would be tonight because I believe they did the little flex pack or flex pick or whatever it's called to where they get to wait till Sunday night to see. I would assume probably a 2:30 game.
Yeah.
Like
it's 11 or 2:30, isn't it?
It's 11 or 2:30, yeah. So it's not going to be a night game, but it'll be I would assume it would not be big noon kickoff. So
no, with Wisconsin losing too, which I think they did. I didn't finish
against Iowa,
yeah.
So
that game's not going to have a whole lot of oomph to it.
I want to address a couple things here on the text line, and the Starter Heyman Jewelers video stream. Let's go first to the video stream, Bach. We were talking about this during the break. Corey says something along the lines of, y'all went bleep on Bo Pelini. You sit behind these mics like y'all didn't run Bo out of town because he hurt your feelings. It's embarrassing how that one coach made the media cry like a bunch of junior high girls and we just hate him because he won. First of all, I was 13 when Bo Pelini got fired. And Bo won games, but I also agree with Bach to one point here, and I don't want to take the idea from Bach, so go ahead.
Oh, well, I've said this forever, and I was covering Nebraska when Bo was here for his final couple of seasons, but I don't think the problem for Nebraska was firing Bo Pelini. I thought Bo Pelini's tenure at Nebraska had kind of run its course. Not to say that it was bad, it just was, it was good compared to this, and it just wasn't going anywhere. So I think the problem was not firing Bo Pelini. I think the problem was hiring Mike Riley. And that's, that hire, if we ever get one like that, I mean, that was the hire. It was like everybody, there were people looking down at their phones saying who, or if you did know, it was like, where did that come from? That's not a hot name in coaching circles. Yeah. That was an example of somebody trying to outthink the room and Sean Eichhorst. And I hope we don't see that again.
Well, and that's where I kind of talked about on my opening line that I said on the show. Nebraska's got to figure out stability in players, in leaders, in coaches, in athletic directors. Now you have that in an athletic director. So you're checking off one of the boxes because Trev Alberts, whoever Nebraska gets, I would be very cautious to say, even as if you're a fan or if you're even a media member, to sit back here and say that Nebraska strikes out on candidates, because whoever Trev Alberts might hire, it might not be the home run hire, but you have to remember that in terms of football, Trev Alberts isn't Bill Moose. Trev Alberts isn't Sean Eichhorst.
Yeah.
There is, he understands.
He's a butt kiss award winner.
He knows what needs to happen.
Right.
Trev will tell you that. So I would caution Husker fans whenever the new coach is announced, if it's not as sexy as you wanted it to be, to maybe just take a step back. And this is, it sounds like it probably sounds like I know what's going to happen. I don't, but I can realize how it's like, you know, but here's the deal. Take a step back, take a breath, and once again, think foundationally from a big picture wise, and think maybe if a hire isn't as sexy, it's just because the right fit. And there's probably more to it than just the head coach, especially with a guy like Trev Alberts leading the way.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to, if you're a Husker fan, and I found this about with the Mike Riley hire too, you don't really, I mean, you can pout about it for as long as you want. It doesn't change what happened. So you just got to kind of jump on board. And so, you know, I'm a free thinker. I like to think for myself. I'm not just going to rave the red pom-poms.
I'd be thrilled with Urban. I'd be thrilled with Dion. I'd be thrilled with a lot of guys.
Yeah.
But in reality, from a foundation standpoint, that might not be the move right now.
It might not be, or maybe it is. I mean, I think those are
Deion Sanders. Though.
Well, I think those are certainly
I would love
two different categories for me. Definitely in the splash higher,
splash higher category, but what
very different resumes
in terms of new or quick success,
right? And so it's going to be fascinating. On that note, I do think that the Mickey Joseph opportunity has kind of sailed. I don't want to say for sure. I mean, I think he's always going to be in the mix unless they announce somebody, but just because of the timing of it. If they haven't announced a guy yet, or they haven't decided on a guy, not announced a guy, because the guy might be coaching still, but if they haven't decided on a guy yet, they've really got to get that done here in a week.
Yeah.
And Mickey Joseph, you know, in the next couple of weeks, in the very least, you know, things can happen from day to day. You never know. But just the timing of it is starting to weigh down that if Mickey had an overwhelming resume at this point, as far as what he'd done with this Nebraska football team, then I think that he would be a little bit more in the mix. We'll see if he, you know, I hope that he's on staff. I just think the chances of him, and it's not me cheering or not cheering for him. I think we all were cheering
that's the thing,
hard enough for him. Yeah. But the reality is you've played 7 games under Mickey Joseph, and under 5 of them, you haven't scored more than 14 points. Now, there's a lot of problems as far as, you know, what he inherited, but this was never going to be a fair shot. This was going to be a shot of kind of what's it going to look like if Mickey Joseph picks it up. And, you know, that's unfortunately where we are.
Yeah. And in addition, I hate to be that guy, but you might have had an offensive coordinator that just was not the easiest to work with.
Yeah.
As a first time, or as an interim head coach, I should say. All right, 402-464-5685, the Honda of Lincoln hotline, the Starter Heyman text. You were just kind of shaking your head there. What were you thinking?
Well, I was just kind of thinking today.
Because think about how different the conversation is if Nebraska's able to beat Minnesota or Illinois.
It is, and it's a huge difference.
And that doesn't fall solely on Mark Whipple, but there's a part of me that's curious, actually a big part of me that's curious what happens if they stick with Anthony Grant. What happens if they're able to continue getting some push? What happens if frickin' Casey Thompson stays in the game?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big what if, but that's, again, the problem with this whole setup to begin with. They wanted to bring this passing offense behind one of the worst offensive lines in college football last year, but especially in pass protection. And you bring in, and to their credit, they did bring in Chuba Purdy, who was like a backup to their starter that they got out of the portal in Casey. But
yeah,
that was part of the weird part of this plan to begin with. It's just like, even for Casey, it's like, did you watch the tape? Did you? This is the line you want to come and start slinging the rock behind?
We can also get into this conversation. I think we're far enough into the season now, and I feel like it's not disrespectful to talk about what's next now. In terms of Nebraska football, because you're out of bowl potential or you're out of bowl consideration and things like that. I think it's extremely important for whoever the next coach is. And Mike, we're going to get to you here in a moment. Whoever the next head coach is, allow your assistants to do their job. Allow the assistants to do their job. Because so like Pat says on the Facebook video or the YouTube stream, infuriating how Frost hadn't developed our offensive line over the past 4 years. You're right. And the things we've heard about Frost and how he would interfere with recruiting and recruiting decisions and things like that, and then just kind of leave guys out to dry. That part is frustrating because Scott Frost isn't in charge. Wasn't the main guy in charge of developing the offensive line, but yet he was making decisions that would hinder the assistant coach's potential at developing the offensive line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, picking and choosing certain guys to be a part of this thing and not be a part of this thing.
But I mean, that's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you're a head coach, you should kind of have the ultimate say on things, and you've just kind of seen it both ways now. Like, yes, Frost, as far as, the frustrations about him kind of stepping on other coaches' decision making throughout his era. And then Mickey does the opposite. He lets Whipple coach, and now we're all mad at him for letting Whipple do his job, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to win games, and that's the way. And there's no bullet points. I mean, there's several that we all want to hit, we all have on our wish list, but there's no just way that you're automatically just going to go in there. There's not like 7 things off a checklist that you can check off, and then you're going to win games. You got to find out what works for you. Different coaches will have different styles for it, but. I just think, I think that might be playing the result a little bit.
Yeah. A name texter says this on the text line. They mentioned about Tom Osborne back in the 70s, 80s. That doesn't matter. What if Michigan would have fired Harbaugh a few years ago when he was on the hot seat? That talk was out there and very real. I think you need to let the good coaches evolve and tweak things from year to year, maybe even take a step back and to move forward again. The Nebraska fan base and administration has never had the patience to let that happen. I would argue they've had too much patience in the last 3 years. Because remember, they took the Harbaugh approach with Scott Frost last year. Trev Alberts took the Harbaugh approach last year. When in reality, at a place like Nebraska, if we want to talk all big and about it as we want to and as we would like to right now, they should have fired Scott Frost last year.
Oh, yeah.
But then they come out, they reduce his salary, they give him the opportunity then if the results come this year that he would get his original salary back and he would get an extra year on his contract, all that. They kind of took that Harbaugh approach with the expectations that weren't very high. The expectations at Michigan under Harbaugh was you beat Ohio State. And he ended up beating Ohio State and then getting embarrassed in a bowl game, in the playoff. But it was okay because he beat Ohio State for the first time in 8 years. But at Nebraska, it was beat Northwestern, beat Georgia Southern. And you couldn't do that. So I would argue that, depending on who it is, has had too much patience, unfortunately, here in Nebraska. Because now obviously hindsight's 2020, but if you look back, you probably should have fired Scott Frost and got the process building foundationally moving a little quicker.
Yeah, I just don't know, which coach he's referring to. Maybe he's speaking on behalf of Mickey and hoping that Mickey can get it going. But I don't think you can argue that with Frost. I mean, Mike Riley, that's kind of a weird argument.
They're talking Solich, Pelini. Okay. Yep.
Solich, yeah.
That makes sense. Pelini kind of ran his course. But
yeah,
Solich, obviously.
Yes, and Solich, obviously. I mean, that's, you go back to that one. I was thinking about it this week. Is Bill Moose, and maybe someone has to play out on the basketball court to see this, is Bill Moose taking Steve Peterson's spot as the worst athletic director? And if he has, he'll have done so, again, with Fred Hoiberg, we kind of have a wait to see. But he'll have done so by making 2 A+ hires.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about hires, not how they played out, hires. Yep.
So did what he was supposed to do as the athletic director here.
Right. So it's just kind of, it's crazy, all this stuff. But I will say this to Nebraska fans, there's too much of a care factor. Every team goes through these, some longer than others, and Nebraska's is now going through a downfall that's a bit longer than others. It feels like it's rock bottom. You feel like you keep hitting rock bottom. I get that. But Nebraska will return to being a very, very good team someday. Yeah. There's just too much of a care factor.
Once again,
there's too much money. And, it's just, quite frankly, if you don't have the right coach in, that's where you talk about your ceilings or where this team's been. They've missed. They've flat out missed on their last 2 coaching hires. You can't have strike 3 here. But even if you do, Nebraska, I still believe it might not even be the next coaching step. But at some point, it's not like Nebraska's.
You're not going to miss
this whole idea that if Scott Frost didn't work, you might as well fold the program. It's ridiculous, right? Yeah. I mean, at some point, there's just too much here at Nebraska for it not to work.
All right, let's go to the Honda of Lincoln hotline. We got Mike on the line. Mike, I apologize, man. We've just kind of been rattling on. I hope you're still there, man. Thanks for being patient. What's on your mind?
Yeah, sure. I was able to drive from Omaha to Lincoln while I was waiting, so that was all right. I didn't call to talk about this. That's no problem. But I do want to just add, from my perspective, I'm tired of the Bo Leavers rewriting history. Look at the draft picks he had on his last 2014 team. I mean, the talent had decreased very greatly. And when we lost, we lost. I don't know if you've ever watched Bussin' with the Boys with Will Compton, but he really loves Bo Pelini, and he had Pelini on there, and he said, Bo, when we got behind, you went ballistic, and we all tightened up, and that's why these blowouts happened. So don't rewrite history. I mean, there was a lot of ugly games. I wanted to talk about your statistics, and that is really depressing, but you're really right. I'm on a group text with a couple Hawkeye season ticket holders, big fans. And at the start of the year, they were whining, oh, my God, we got to get rid of Ferris because he'll never go out and get the transfers. And Nebraska did a great job getting transfers and shoring up all their holes. And, we got to get rid of him. He's not going to play, in the modern game. And I kept telling them, hey, man, you guys have the culture. You don't need it. You develop players. Now, granted, he's never going to win a national title. He'll probably never win a conference title. But as they were losing earlier in the year, they're going nuts. We got to get rid of him. I said, we'll get it figured out. Mark my words. Ferentz seems to always figure it out, at least since 2015. He always figures it out, and then they'd have a bad game. Oh, my God, we got to fire everybody, start over. Well, look what they've done. They figured it out. They developed players. They have a culture, and I think there's a big lesson to be learned there from Nebraska. I'm not sure what it is, but as much as I hate Iowa, I got to tip my hat to them because they do have a culture, and they have coaches that can get it figured out where it seems like we never, for years, figure out our problems. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Appreciate it, Mike. And you're absolutely right. And you can sum all that up into one word: identity. And having a guy in place that starts at the top in a head coach that not only outwardly talks, you also remember, Bach, like throughout the past staffs, everything's been such a big secret. Like, especially the last 4 years, everything is such a big secret as to who's going to play, who's available, what's going on. Everything's such a big secret. And I truly believe that not only transparency within the program works, and I think there's been some of that lacking in recent years, but I would also add that when you have confidence in what you're preaching and how you're operating on a day-to-day basis, you want to tell people about it. You're excited to tell people about how you're operating and why it's going to work. And you just haven't had that. I don't think you've had a guy that's truly confident in what they're building at Nebraska in a while.
Well, and it is too. I mean, you part of that is the fishbowl that is Lincoln, Nebraska, and we're a part of it. Everybody, all the media that's around it. When we talk about this job opening, it's not going to be for everybody. There are going to be some people that just want some time away. They're not, necessarily. They go out about town. They're going to be, everybody's trying to get their autograph or whatever. Questions left and right from the media about every little minute thing on the roster just to get some story out there. Talking to Simple before, he said it, and you can kind of see it on these certain guys, but war on Pelini, probably war on Callahan. That is part of the job that you're going to have to take over, is that the care factor is very high at Nebraska. But the Iowa thing's just fascinating because they are a team that has an identity. They are a team that could do better, to his friend's point, if they went to the portal.
100%.
But they didn't do it, but they stuck with what they do. They've now won 3 straight. They control their own destiny, and they have games against Minnesota and Nebraska, each of which they have not lost to since 2014.
And Corey and Lincoln says this, and I agree with Corey here, and he's saying their culture is mediocrity. They're comfortable in mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kirk Ferentz is comfortable. He's made a living off of being mediocre. That's not where Nebraska wants to be. And I frankly, Bach and I will both agree that that's not where Nebraska should put their sights here in the future. But from a identity standpoint, Iowa has an identity. They know what they want to do every year. They're comfortable in it, and it's proven to work. They might have only a 7-win season this year or whatever, or a 6-win season this year. But they're okay with that in Iowa. Why? Because every other year they'll win a Big Ten title. Big Ten divisional title. They'll compete with it. They'll beat Nebraska. They'll beat Wisconsin. And they'll be a top, a team that's ranked in between 20 and 25th in the final 8 people.
Yeah, I mean it's night games at Kinnick though. Those aren't easy. I don't care if you're Ohio State, Michigan. You have fun times there, and like again, I think and to what they do is crazy. And Phil Parker doesn't get enough credit there. The amount of interception return for touchdowns and special teams touchdowns they have, like sometimes like yeah, you hope you get one of those. They literally don't. Not only do they rely on them, but they get them every single game. It is ridiculous.
Whether they're playing Nebraska, Northwestern, or Ohio State,
right?
They get them.
It's just insane. But you look at Iowa, and they're the frustrating part because they're the rival and they're the team that when Nebraska joined the Big Ten, we all just kind of went, there's the border, but they don't live up to us, and they've beaten our butts for so many years straight. Now that a lot of fans just can't stand them. But again, that's the identity of winning in the Big Ten West. Does that translate to winning Big Ten titles? It hasn't. So, but that's to my idea or to my thinking with this long idea of this is that Nebraska can do what Iowa does, can do what Wisconsin can do, what Minnesota does as a philosophy, but add in that annual top 25 recruiting aspect to it. If you are recruiting the top 25, which I think Nebraska does pretty much by itself, not really dependent on the coach is, and then you add that development that we all know has been missing in the program, I think they can be the best version of that. And at times that can win. I mean, remember, I'm not calling for option football, but remember Tom Osborne didn't win for 22 years. And then he won with power. And he had that additional speed because they could recruit, the Tommies and the guys from, Florida and all the Lawrence Phillips, those types that were just crazy athletic. You need that too. It's a blend. It's not just, hey, let's be a power football team and that's all. But, I think that's the blueprint for Nebraska, and how they've gone away from it for this long just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And at the same time, I mean, you need the right coach in place. So if Urban Meyer might not necessarily do that, but I'd take another swing on a guy like that that's already proven he can win 3 national titles. But not a whole lot of other guys with different flashy systems. I'm done with that. I mean, unless it's a proven coach at that level, you've got to start thinking about what's going to win in the Midwest. Not what somebody's doing well here in Florida or out in the West Coast. What's in the Midwest?
Yeah, I agree with you, Bach. There's an interesting text on the text line that I want to get to after the break coming at me. Once again, I want to get to that after the break because we do have to get a timeout here. Got about 30 minutes left. We got 2 more timeouts to take. 30 minutes left, though, here as we wrap up our final thoughts. Nebraska falls 34-3 at the hands of Michigan. Haven't really talked a whole lot about the game, but it kind of went the way that we expected, I suppose. And frankly, guys, it's frustrating. Like we got yelled at on the text line because so this is what it said. You guys are repeating all the things we suck at like it's a new revelation. What else could we say? It feels like it's the same thing. So we want to take this into approach where it's program standpoint. How do we start to get this thing going on the right track? Because I was hesitant before because Nebraska still had an opportunity to make a bowl game, and you kind of, the writing wasn't fully on the wall, and you didn't really know what was going on altogether. But now it feels like that ship has kind of passed. That ship has kind of sailed. And so I think it's okay now to kind of look forward to the future, because this has been an excruciating long 2 months and a day of a coaching search. And now we're all starting to understand as fans and media folks why why athletic directors don't fire coaches 3 games into the season usually. Because this is rough. I mean, it's every week there's a new name. Every week there's some person talking on the podcast about why Deion Sanders is coming here, or why Urban Meyer's coming here, or we got Urban Meyer left big noon kickoff early. That means he's coming to Nebraska. Just holy smokes. Once again, just kind of take a deep breath, I suppose. But the text of you guys are repeating all the things we suck at like it's a new revelation, that text kind of made me giggle a little bit, because if it's not the same thing over and over and over again the last 3 or 4 years, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to describe it, unfortunately. Let's get to our final timeout. Top of the hour coming up next as we get you ready for the second post-game show. Jake Sorensen and the folks are out there. Tanner's Bar and Grill, 30th and Yankee Hill. We'll take a timeout. You're listening to 93.7 The Ticket.
Action Plumbing, Heating, Air, and Electric is the call I make when I have a need for plumbing services. Whether it's for my home or office, if I need a repair to a water heater, softener, or even my garbage disposal, I know I can count on Action to help. In one simple call, their amazing customer service team promptly schedules a service call, often getting to my needs within a day. Action delivers honest quality services we can count on. To learn more, visit actionlincoln.com.
Get an immediate look back at the game from the people who know it best. It's the Tanner's Postgame Show and the Final Word live from Tanner's Bar and Grill at 30th and Yankee Hill. Hear from former players and national champions like Jay Foreman, Rashawn Jackson, and Aaron Davis and see what they saw in that day's game. It's the Tanner's Postgame Show and the Final Word, live and in person, home or away at Tanner's Bar and Grill, brought to you by Bauer Infrastructure. Only here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Gary Michaels Clothiers specializes in men's tailored clothing. Off the rack or custom made to measure, there is simply no better shopping experience. Offering designer furnishings, sportswear, shoes, outerwear, and accessories for a man always concerned at looking his best. With world-class tailoring and personal service, all makes Gary Michaels Clothiers Nebraska's premier store for men. Come visit us now at Village Gardens, south of 56th and Pine Lake Road in Lincoln.
Working at Continental in Lincoln isn't a job, it's a career. And right now they've raised wages again and they're hiring for production operators at $24.11 per hour, which grows to $28.27 per hour within 3 years. Skilled trade positions now start at $32.76 per hour with opportunities to make more based on certifications. Continental also has salary jobs available and great benefits, plus medical and prescription costs at very low premiums. Dental, vision, and life insurance are offered at no premium cost to the associates, with increased bonuses and vacation for new hires. To learn more or to apply, go to continental-jobs.com with keyword Lincoln. Come work at Continental today.
A good game with good friends. But isn't it time to up the score when it comes to the food? Wings and Rings is here for every football fan. Catch the game on one of their big screens or snag a tailgate pack to go. They're cranking up the heat and throwing in mad flavor this season. Stop by your locally owned Wings and Rings on O Street Meridian Park or 48th and Old Cheney in Williamsburg Village, or grab some crave-worthy Wings and Rings to go. Make them your go-to destination to watch your team bring home the win. Wings and Rings. Game time just got better.
This is Lincoln's home for sports talk on the FM dial. Also online at theticketfm.com.
On the internet.
KNTK FM Firth, 93.7 The Ticket.
Eustace Body Shop, where our customers send their friends. That's the greatest compliment we can receive. If you've been in an accident, we'll get you back in your vehicle as quickly as possible. Our technicians care about you and your family and repair your vehicle to factory standards. We handle your claim from start to finish and provide a free loaner car. Stop by for a free estimate. Eustace Body Shop, just south of 88th and Highway 2.
The most recommended Eustace Body Shop. That's who we are.
A smoke-free environment is the only way to fully protect from the dangers of secondhand smoke. That's why smoke-free policies are so important to me. Whether it's in my car, apartment building, or when I'm dining outdoors, there's no place for secondhand smoke or e-cigarette aerosol. Breathe easier knowing the facts. Visit smokefree.ne.gov. Paid for by Tobacco Free Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Lincoln's best place to meet, eat, and compete.
Bowling, check. Arcade, check. Laser tag, check. Mini golf, check. Sand volleyball, cornhole, bocce, food, drinks. Check. The newly renovated Sun Valley Lanes and Games has something fun to offer for guests of all ages. Win prizes in the arcade or challenge your friends in one of the many attractions. Plan a night of fun by reserving your spot online at sunvalleylanes.com.
Sun Valley.
Hey, who caught that ball? That field goal was good, right? Is the scoreboard fuzzy to anyone else?
Dude, you have got to get your eyes checked, man.
If you're noticing that the game is getting a little tougher to follow, it might be time for a checkup at Premier Vision. They have state-of-the-art equipment, a variety of frames, and great lens options. Visit Premier Vision today, just south of Van Dorn at 84th and Firethorn.
Bauer Underground has been serving local contractors and utility contractors all across the state since 1997. When you see the black and white trucks, you know that the best workers in the business have arrived. Bauer is currently looking for equipment operators, laborers, diesel mechanics, and aerial linemen. Join the brotherhood built upon hard work, authentic people, and a pedigree of success. They're offering top-notch benefits, a matching 401k, and a $600 per year clothing allowance. Bauer Underground, a family-friendly company with room for advancement.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 a.m, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Back to the Husker Afterparty Postgame Show on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Bring them out, bring them out. Bring them out, bring them out. Bring them out, bring them out. Bring them out, bring them out.
All right, back here on the Husker Afterparty Postgame Show, 93.7 The Ticket, theticketfm.com. Nick and Bach hanging out with you guys. Appreciate you hanging on because it's been a heck of a day as Nebraska falls 34-3. Let's make this a little positive here because actually let's hear from Mickey Joseph on the schedule ahead.
Well, we got to have some pride. You know, we got Wisconsin and Iowa left, so we got to have some pride, and we got to continue just to come to work tomorrow and try to get a game plan to help us be successful and execute the game plan. But we got to keep going. We're not going to quit.
So there's Mickey Joseph. I do want to talk about this. Let's talk quick turnarounds here, because and this is why I feel like it's more maybe of a fit thing than splash thing going forward, because obviously Illinois is one example in Power 5 football, right? How about UConn? Because UConn in 2019, I believe, was 2-10. They didn't play in 2020. In 2021, they were 1-11. Jim Mora, the former UCLA head coach that got fired from UCLA, goes to UConn, which statistically over the last however many years has been one of the bottom feeders in all of college football. They knock off top 20 ranked Liberty today to become bowl eligible in Jim Mora's first year. It happens. Like, you get the right guy, you get the right kind of mentality within your program, and you can win at a place like UConn, you can win at a place like Kansas, you can win at a place like Illinois. God forbid, for sure, you can win at a place like Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it just doesn't even make any sense. I mean, that's why it's so difficult. As I pointed out earlier, Bill Moose made 2 A+ hires and might be the worst athletic director Nebraska's had in forever. And then, you know, the Sonny Dykes example. Sonny Dykes just couldn't get it done at California. I mean, and then, I mean, does a good job at SMU, don't get me wrong, but nobody was expecting them to be top 5 in year one. I mean, it's just crazy sometimes how this stuff happens, but you know, Nebraska, I that's why, again, unless there's just a glowing guy on the board, which there was with Scott Frost, but unless there's just like that type of guy on the board, I wouldn't focus so much on the little differences that make me like this guy more than next. I would look at philosophy, because I think Nebraska needs a philosophical change rather than a certain guy. But a certain guy can get it done, too.
And I will add, they've had a somewhat of a philosophical change with Mickey Joseph. Like, they have, as much as we don't want to admit it. And obviously it's been controversial about how great of an opportunity or great of a possibility, I suppose, did Mickey Joseph have at becoming the head coach. He had an opportunity. He got the chance. Now, obviously, there's always caveats to where it wasn't his guys, it wasn't his handpicked assistants. I understand that. But as an interim head coach, or excuse me, as a guy that's trying to prove to be a head coach that he's capable of being a head coach,
getting the job in that space that you would be the permanent head coach at is as great of an opportunity as you can have.
Oh, yeah.
Because if it goes well, there's no doubt that it transfers over. There is zero doubt. Why? Because you did it as an interim coach without your assistants, without your recruits, without a full season. That's what you did. So if it was completely 180 here and Nebraska had beaten, like I've said multiple times, if Nebraska has beaten Wisconsin and Illinois and maybe held a little tougher, now obviously Casey Thompson being out plays a part in it, holds a little tougher with Michigan, there's a completely different conversation being had today. Completely different conversation. But unfortunately, that's not the conversation that is having. That's going on.
But I do want this too, and I said this earlier. There's only a few games left.
We always have to preface whatever we say. Yeah,
well, yeah, but I think that there's still, and this is because of the dark days of Nebraska football, but that there's still something left out there this season. I mean, for Mickey Joseph, I think timeline wise, it's going to be hard for him to get that job because they really got to be narrowing in their focus here this week. But if he can beat Wisconsin or Iowa, he will still have a lot of good goodwill here in Lincoln. I mean,
100%.
regardless of whether he gets
100%.
the job or he's on the staff or whatever. But that's what I want. The feeling that they're not bowl eligible. The season's out the door. Beating Wisconsin or Iowa in their own miniature window is huge for a program that hasn't beaten those teams. Those teams have beaten you down for 8 straight games, 7 straight games, whatever it is between the two programs. So there's still a lot to look forward to. And
absolutely,
those teams, I mean, I guess the downside, I mean, Iowa beat Wisconsin. So Wisconsin more matches up with the style of those other teams. Iowa, like we said, kind of does it their own way this year because they don't have a very good offense. But I would say that these Wisconsin and Iowa games, as weird as it is, because those are usually the top of the division, and Iowa still might end up that way at the end of the year. It feels like, especially if you get Casey Thompson back, you've got a shot in those games. It's not, we're not at the point where Nebraska just got so manhandled and destroyed that they're just not going to win these games down the stretch. If they get Casey Thompson and one guy at the quarterback position can make that big of a difference, I think we're going to get pretty jacked up for this Wisconsin game.
I think so too, and you should.
Yeah.
Because we are all rallying, although you are out of bowl eligibility, we are all rallying around Mickey. Because we understand, it's not that Mickey gets a pass, but we understand the situation that he inherited.
Yeah.
We get it, right? And it might be worse than we ever thought it was going to be, or we thought back on September 11th. Now on November 12th, we realized that it was worse than we initially thought. We get that. And so we're still rallying around Mickey. But we also have to look forward and kind of look at both sides of the coin. What happens if Mickey's not the head coach? What happens if Nebraska does finish 3-9? What happens? Where does Nebraska go next?
Yeah.
And we can all agree that we hope Mickey Joseph is involved in some capacity.
Absolutely.
In some capacity. You mentioned Casey Thompson, Bach. If you missed it earlier, here's Mickey Joseph updating us on Casey Thompson's injury.
Yes, and it's like you said, it's up to Casey. He still have some nerve damage in his pinky. So we'll see how Casey feels tomorrow. I'm sure if I look at my phone, he's probably already texted me and called me that he's ready to play next week. So we'll take it day by day with Casey. We won't put Casey out there unless he can play at a high level.
All right, so there's a little bit of an update on there. C-Money does say this. I think everyone needs to acknowledge the notable difference in lack of mistakes since Frost has been gone. The issues are now noticeably falling on the players and how they just can't quite get it done for a full game. Yeah, you're right, C-Money. Like, discipline, energy has been better. Unfortunately, that's such a tough part about this, Bach. Because once again, it's like wash, rinse, repeat for what we have to say, what we say every week. It's like the whole, you're not going to see the progress that Mickey's making behind the scenes on Saturdays right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Nebraska's just in a really, really weird spot. The fan base is in a really, really weird spot where it's like you want to see it happen now, and you're trying to tell yourself, be patient, try to stay patient, but you've been patient for far too long. And now, like, everybody has a breaking point. Everybody has a snapping point. And if you're not snapped yet, Husker fans, then all power to you, because holy smokes, it's just frustrating, unfortunately. But all right, let's get to our final timeout. When we come back, we'll put our final thoughts, maybe talk a little more closer or specific with this game. Maybe hear from Logan Smothers as well when we come back. Husker Afterparty Postgame Show, Nebraska falls to Michigan 34-3. We'll send it off to the guys out at Tanner's Bar and Grill here in about 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and take our final timeout. 93.7 The Ticket, ticketfm.com.
Lincoln's best place to meet, eat, and compete.
Bowling, check. Arcade, check. Laser tag, check. Mini golf, check. And volleyball, cornhole, bocce, food, drinks. Check, 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 check. The newly renovated Sun Valley Lanes and Games has something fun to offer for guests of all ages. Win prizes in the arcade or challenge your friends in one of the many attractions. Plan a night of fun by reserving your spot online at sunvalleylanes.com.
Sun Valley.
Action Plumbing, Heating, Air, and Electric brings exciting career opportunities for you or someone you know. They are now hiring plumbers, electricians, and HVAC installers to continually build their professional team. They offer competitive pay and full benefits packages that include health, dental, vision, PTO, and 401k options. Action has created a positive team environment for over 50 years. Apply online at actionlincoln.com.
Best. It's the Tanner's Postgame Show and the Final Word live from Tanner's Bar and Grill at 30th and Yankee Hill. Hear from former players and national champions like Jay Foreman, Rashawn Jackson, and Aaron Davis, and see what they saw in that day's game. It's the Tanner's Postgame Show and the Final Word, live and in person, home or away at Tanner's Bar and Grill, brought to you by Bauer Infrastructure. Only here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Bauer Underground has been serving local contractors and utility contractors all across the state since 1997. When you see the black and white trucks, you know that the best workers in the business have arrived. Bauer is currently looking for equipment operators, laborers, diesel mechanics, and aerial linemen. Join the brotherhood built upon hard work, authentic people, and a pedigree of success. They're offering top-notch benefits, a matching 401k, and a $600 per year clothing allowance. Bauer Underground, a family-friendly company with room for advancement.
Hi, Sean Callahan here for Koppel Chevrolet GMC, and things are rocking in Louisville. We've got transport showing up every day with loads of new inventory, lots of new trucks, SUVs, and crossovers. Our pre-owned inventory is also filling up fast. Our GMC Terrain inventory is really filling up fast, so we're putting special pricing on those right now. This is the time to check out our GMC Terrains, as we've got all models with a great selection of colors at a discounted price. So please stop in or check them out online at koppelcars.com. You'll be glad you did. Callahan, and football season is here, and there is one place that has all the games plus great food and beer specials. Tanner's Bar and Grill at 30th and Yankee Hill. Whether it's Thursday night football, college football Saturdays, NFL Sundays, or Monday night football, there's a great view of the game from any seat with different food and drink specials every night. Try the Blue Ribbon Reuben sandwich or the prime rib French dip or any of their famous chicken wings. That's Tanner's Bar and Grill at 30th and Yankee Hill.
If you're in Lincoln, Waverly, or the surrounding area, listen up. Select Plumbing gets it right the first time on a variety of issues for your home and business, including general plumbing, water heaters, faucet and fixture repair, underground sewer and water repairs, backflow testing, and more. Keep your property free from leaks and other issues. Call today for a free estimate at 402-560-6197. Plus, they're hiring service plumbers. If you're in Lincoln, Waverly, or the surrounding area, contact Select Plumbing to inquire at 402-560-6197.
Look at your car. It's filthy and probably has a few dings and nicks all over it. Don't be that guy. Get it upgraded and repaired at Renew Your Auto. At Renew Your Auto, they offer tons of services: ceramic coating, window tinting, paintless dent repair, washes and details, bed liners, body shop, and more. Where can you go to get services like that all in one place? Schedule your appointment today at renewyourauto.com. See what Renew can do for you.
Trendy or traditional, Gary Michaels Clothiers specializes in men's tailored clothing. Off the rack or custom made to measure, there is simply no better shopping experience. Offering designer furnishings, sportswear, shoes, outerwear, and accessories for a man always concerned at looking his best. With world-class tailoring and personal service, all makes Gary Michaels Clothiers Nebraska's premier store for men. Come visit us now at Village Gardens, south of 56th and Pine Lake Road in Lincoln.
This message is for Karina, our mom who finished her high school diploma at age 28. Hi, Mom. It's Emmettith and Nicholas. Congratulations on getting your diploma. You worked so hard and have taught us so much. We love you.
When you graduate, they graduate. Finish your high school diploma for you and for them. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Back to the Husker Afterparty Postgame Show on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, so Nick Sainer, Jake Bachhoven back with you guys. We get this off the Starter Heyman Jewelers video stream from Dogpaw 2. Just stop, guys. The only reason you guys say that about Mickey is because he played here. If this is Whipple in charge right now, you wouldn't be saying this. I will go out on a limb, and I need to be very cautious with how I say this because this might hurt some people's feelings. I don't care if you played here. Like as when we talk about who should be the next head coach at Nebraska. Now, okay, see, this is where I wanted to be very careful because I feel like I need to kind of explain myself here. I care if you play here. Former players are very important to success of programs. But when we're talking about who should be the next head coach, the former player aspect is great. But if you're a former player and the fit doesn't work or your philosophy doesn't work, but I'm not going out of my way to hire you just because you're a former player, understanding that, hey, the philosophy doesn't match up with what we want to have here at Nebraska. The belief, the identity, all that doesn't matter. The fit, just categorize it all into fit. I do not want Trev Alberts to hire somebody just because they are a former player. So therefore, I am not going to talk about and rally and cheer and promote a guy that I don't think would be successful as the head coach at Nebraska, whether he's a former player or not. Now, like I said, it's very important to have former players involved around the station, around the program. We have them involved around the station. We hear their football minds. We understand that. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to cheer or publicly root for a guy if I don't think that his fit is going to be good at Nebraska. So the whole former player aspect, it's a great added bonus. But if you played here in the 90s or the 80s, whatever, it doesn't matter if you're fighting for the head coaching job if your fit's not going to be connected or if it's not going to be a good fit for today.
Yeah, and that's what kind of hurt Nebraska fan base too much about with the Scott Frost debacle is that, that was long kind of thought is you need a guy that knows, that bleeds Husker Red, all that stuff. And it just didn't work out that way. Now other teams like Michigan, they have their Michigan man.
100%.
They've thought that for years too. We need a Michigan man, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's important to have former players around the program without a doubt. But if you look at where we are, I guess part of this season and where we are is 3-7. And so I'm not, again, I support Mickey Joseph. And I want to also say that Mickey Joseph isn't randomly just a former player we plucked out of a hat to give the associate head coaching tag. He earned it. He's one of the hottest wide receiver coaches in the nation, one of the best recruiters in the nation. So it's not just random, but I'm not saying that, but your program is run by former players. Mm-hmm. You have Trev Alberts as the athletic director.
Yeah.
You had Scott Frost as the head coach. You had Mickey Joseph as the interim coach. Mm-hmm. You had a Raiola probably favor to hire an offensive line. I mean, a lot of this stuff in the past couple of years has been very former player led.
Yeah.
And you went 3-9 last year, 3-7 now. So it's not it's just not a magical thing you can just throw on and make it work. I like to see the guys around the program.
100%.
And like you said, if there's a fit there, then absolutely go for it, but don't force it.
That's where I'm like, it's great to have former players around the program as long as they make your program better. But I think there also is and it's a very touchy subject at a tradition-rich place like Nebraska. And I also feel from reading some of the texts, seeing Twitter, seeing social media, there's a lot of people on edge tonight.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of people on edge, and understandably so. So please don't.
Which is good.
Come
'Cause
at,
I was worried
it
about
is.
apathy.
I am very worried about. Yeah, I still am. I still.
I'll take anger over apathy.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. But also, everything having former players, non-former players, just normal coaches, as long as they make your program better, that's all that matters. If a former player or not, if they're around the program and it's making your program worse, well, then I don't. Whatever you got to do to get things going in the right direction, do it. Whatever that, like, because at the end of the day, the main driver is winning. The main driver is winning. Emotions certainly play a part into it, but main drivers winning and losing games. I mean, it depends on if you win games.
But I mean, to your point, the damning quote there from Trev Alberts is going to be, with Scott Frost says he's a brother. You mean, remember when he said that? You can't have any more brother passes right now. I mean, I know there's a lot of guys out there that have, fought and given their best, given their everything, the Nebraska's program. But I think, I think this is. I think it's kind of officially at this time last year, 3-7, Trev elected to keep Scott around, and it's gone about as disastrous as you could have thought it could.
Yeah, this will be the last text we take tonight. The Milkman asks, "What is this fit that you see, Nick?" Just asking. And I'll go and I'll let because I want to hear yours, Bach. You don't need to we talked about it in depth at the start of the show. You need to fix this thing foundationally. Unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say it, this is not, the more and more we kind of dive deeper into this program, this is not a thing that's going to be fixed next year. There can be progress made next year, but the end goal might not be met next year.
Which is usually the case the first year.
Yes, exactly. And it's great but in Nebraska, there's higher expectations. It's great to have these flashy pass or parts of an offense. It's great to have the excellent athletes. It's great to have the 5-star quarterback, the 5-star wide receiver, the draft eligible, the day one guys on offense. It's great to have those. But unfortunately, what I think Nebraska needs to do, and this is from years and years of poor evaluation on the recruiting trail. Now, that's different than recruiting, just general recruiting. You've recruited well in terms of stars and rankings, but you've evaluated poorly on how those guys' talent will translate onto Saturdays sooner rather than later. Lack of development once they've gotten into the program. It's been really, really poor throughout multiple coaching staffs. You got to figure out, once again, the right fit that can develop guys, that it might not show off on some of the better 3-stars. If you evaluate them correctly, then those will be better fits, once again, for your program, and will help your program out in the long run more than a 4-star will. That's just the blatant truth, but it takes evaluation. It takes effort. You can't be lazy. And then once the guys are here, you got to do something with it. Then once you have 2-3 years of, and when I say that, Milkman, it's built in the trenches. Michigan showed it to you today. You can, and Illinois, Minnesota showed it to you guys the last 2 weeks. You can compete in a conference like the Big Ten, or a division like the Big Ten West, with a solid offensive line and a running back, right? You can have a pretty bad quarterback and you can compete in the Big Ten West, as sad as this is to say. So once you have that foundation built and there's stability within the program, I think that's another big thing. Stability through the athletic department, stability at head coach. You can't change offensive coordinators year after year. You can't change offensive line coaches year after year. Can't change running back coaches year after year. Once you have that stability from the top on down, then you can start to talk about athletes. And we're missing one piece that's out of the transfer portal that we need to go get. We need to go get a Trey Palmer out of the transfer portal. We need to go get a Samori Toure, because that's the one piece that we're missing, because we have an offensive line that can give our quarterback time. We have a running back that has good vision, can run between the tackles, and we have a quarterback that can deliver the ball and make the right reads. Stability. That's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, you want to get to a point where the transfer portal's not saving your season, it's adding to your season. It's adding to your roster. And obviously this year was kind of saving. It's going to take some time to build up that way. And Nebraska's going to take transfer portal players the next couple of years, basically to make up the foundation of the roster, because that's the position they're in and they have NIL money. And so it's going to make sense to do so. But eventually you want to use that, that NIL money, that transfer portal and guys will want to flock here as soon as you start doing well. So it'll all start rolling. A bit of hope for next year, by the way. Northwestern lost again today. Colorado lost again last night. Combined, those teams don't have as many wins as Nebraska does, though Northwestern's win was over Nebraska. So 2 year teams for your first year head coach is going to be pretty bad in having their own kind of disaster to get up from. So that's just kind of a side note. Another one from today, I think they did, Blake Corum finished with a very Mohamed Ibrahim-like game, 28 carries, 162 yards. So they didn't quite shut him down, but they did limit the long run from him today. Only 12 yards for a long for him. That's for what it's worth, the shortest long run he's had all season in a game. So, it wasn't flashy. They didn't, there's other things. Didn't turn the ball over. Alante Brown took one of the biggest hits in one of the worst regions I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and
wild.
Got right up, which was good to see. Obviously, hopefully Coach Whipple, whatever you may dislike about his play calling, is okay.
Yeah, that was not fun.
That's scary stuff.
We make jokes about, hey, we need a change in offense coordinator. Not that way.
Yeah.
Not that way.
And hopefully Chubb is okay.
Yeah.
Chubb also, with anybody else that was banged up in the game. I know Garrett Nelson went down, but just kind of a couple different thoughts I had there.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and hit the out music here. We got about a minute left. Milkman followed up with, Nick, do you think there's too much donor money making decisions behind the scenes? Honestly, above my pay grade, I don't know. I would say that I hope that the donors, if they don't know football, keep their heads and their mouths out of the football making decisions and support the program like they're supposed to. Mm-hmm. Leave the football decisions to Trev. Leave the football decisions to the folks in the athletic department. But like I said, above my pay grade. So we'll see. Here's the deal. I don't know. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we hear a head coach early next week.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Most likely, I think still the day after Black Friday because you got college football, or the day after that, actually, because most teams will be playing on that Saturday.
All right, we send it off to Tanner's Bar and Grill, 30th and Yankee Hill, Tanner's postgame show. Thanks again to Action Plumbing, Heating, AC, and Electrical, Gary Michaels Clothiers, Brant Excavating. Thanks to you guys for participating. You guys have been awesome. Huskers fall 34-3 to Michigan. We'll talk to you next Saturday.
Action Plumbing, Heating, Air, and Electric is the call I make when I have a need for plumbing services. Whether it's for